Hello, and welcome to Creating Space in Conversation with. My name is Ingrid Pope, and I'm the founder of Creating Space. Our mission is to declutter the world of everything that gets in our way and that stops us from being our best selves. Today, I'm speaking with Susie Flashman-Jarvis, who is an executive coach and also a counselor. And we will be talking about all things emotions and emotional clutter, or as she calls it, or many others also call it, emotional baggage. Enjoy. Hi, Susie. It's lovely to speak with you today.
Hey Ingrid, it's really lovely to be here. Thank you.
I'm very excited to talk about you with you even, because we're going to be talking about emotional clutter. And I think that that's something that feels really quite intangible, and we can't see it, and therefore we might be much less aware that it gets in our way. And in your work, how do you notice that clutter gets in people's way?
I think what I find, because as I work as a coach and as I work as a counsellor, and because I have a backstory of my own, I notice that people they almost have this assumption that they'll not make it, or they have an assumption that says, if they find out about you, ... And I think when I am spending time with people, my strapline is, I help you to get out of the way of yourself. And by that, I mean, I help you to look at the things that come in and kind of limit you. We call them limiting beliefs, I suppose, but also they're untrue assumptions that we're assuming about ourselves, and also assuming that other people think and believe about us. And I suppose that's how I encounter it, by people coming in, because I work with leaders, and leaders by their very nature are successful a lot. Sometimes maybe they're not, but the people I work with are pretty successful, but there's still this noise. And it is the clutter. I call it baggage that gets in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And baggage gives also another slightly visual representation of something you might trip over.
Yeah, like you're walking around and you're carrying this stuff. If we're carrying like this backpack, like, oh, and also we're trying to position ourselves so no one can see the thing on the back. It's almost like a metaphor there of, oh, I'm only going to show you this part of me, because if you see this thing on my back, you're going to think, oh, what is that? And then you'll be distracted by that. It's funny, actually. I did a webinar this week, and I talked about my story, and I was left with this, oh, my life. Because they know this stuff about me, did they then think it was no good? And for ages, I thought I couldn't measure it, I couldn't assess it. And in the end, even with all my experience, 20 years as a therapist, 4 years as a coach, I still couldn't get past the fact that people knew this story about me. And did they then think that what I offered wasn't good enough? And it took for someone who ran it and took part of it to tell me it was good that I finally accepted it. It's crazy, huh? That's baggage stuff, see, getting in the way.
And I guess there's also something there about the longevity of emotions that might get in the way. If we think about physical clutter, we pick something up and we throw it out. But emotions, they stay with us. You talk about your life, so they stay with us for our whole life.
Yeah, and I think that's why when I work as a therapeutic coach, I'm looking at the whole person. I don't go deep with my clients unless they need it. But what I say to them is, the things that have been said to you, not said to you, done to you, not done to you, are the things that you will drag often into your future. Now, look, I've been a therapist that long, obviously had loads of therapy myself as part of becoming an accredited therapist. So you'd think, wouldn't you, that I would have dealt with that stuff. And in the main, to be honest, Ingrid, I have. But when I'm stepping into a new territory, like the webinars and if you like, teaching my peers, I go to a place that goes, who am I? Who am I to do that stuff? And then it takes an external person to be able to say, Susie, that's good. That's good stuff. So it's crazy, isn't it? The way we can't entirely shake stuff. And I believe that our stories are the things that make us us. So I don't want people to focus on the fact that I was a heroin addict 30 years ago. I want them to focus on the fact that I am the person I am today. On the other hand, if people knowing that I was that and I'm who I am today is useful, then I'm very happy to offer it, because I think authenticity is crucial, especially in this time now. Well, not even in the COVID time, but in a time where we like to present ourselves in certain ways. Sorted, is my hair nice? Is my makeup done? Am I looking, buff as a bloke? Am I, all the things that we do that are masks that we wear often. When we rock up and we're ourselves, people, I'm discovering, really like that, because we become more trustworthy as well, owning this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you use the word masks there. I sometimes talk about decluttering the layers. We also talk about leaders, needing to show their authentic self and bringing humanity into leadership again, because that's what's going to make them better people, leaders.
Yeah, I mean, I have a strapline and everything I write, and it's lead with integrity and grace. And sometimes I'm working with someone, they say, talk to me about leading with integrity and grace. And I am helping them to look at, okay, if you are being authentic you, even if you're at the top of a multi-billion-dollar business, you still will have stuff in your life. You might be married, you might have teenagers, you might have had someone die, you might have failed something. This is the stuff that comes into the work I do. And what these things don't like is they don't like coming to the light, because then they shrivel up because you're looking at them. All the time we don't look at this stuff and we don't bring it into the light, it kind of looms large, if you like. And I think about the example of me doing that webinar, if you like, I brought my stuff into the light for people to see. I then was afraid. I brought it into the light, even though I've told my stories a million times. I was afraid because I didn't know what my peers would think about it. But when I look back at the recording and the chat, it was so accepting. And I think if you're the leader of an organization, you lead with integrity and grace, you will ask those empathic questions that echo within you. That's kind of the emotional clutter stuff. If you can do that and you say, how are you? How is your wife? How are you getting on working at home? Because we're working in different rooms. I'm here in my attic office. You're there in yours by the look of it. And we're all working in different environments. And I don't know about you, but it's quite curious watching people, how they position themselves for their interviews or whatever. And we're finding out more. But what we're finding is a common humanity. And that's what I think is really important.
And that's a lovely expression, a common humanity.
Yeah, there's this guy called Richard Draw, and he says we're all naked under our clothes. I thought, yeah, we really are. We really are. Whether we're billionaires or, we haven't got anything or very little, we have the same needs and wants, and those needs and wants, our primary need is to belong. And if people connect with us, suddenly we're not alone. So most of the people I speak to aren't ex-heroin addicts. They're definitely not ex-topless models. They're definitely not got my story. And yet, because they know I've done this stuff, they'll have things in their life that they're not so pleased with. They have things in their life that they would have survived. And then it's almost like they can recognize a fellow survivor, and then the connection takes place. And what I'm learning in my journey is that being authentic and real doesn't diminish my skill base. It isn't stopping people working with me. In some ways, it's helping people to go, oh yeah, I'd like to work with her because I think maybe she's fearless, or maybe she won't be shocked when I say this stuff. That's a key thing. Sometimes people come to me and they say, oh, I read about you. I'm like, okay. And I said, well, why do you choose me? I said, because you're not going to be surprised. Funny, isn't it?
And I wonder, how do we remind ourselves that everybody else is human? When we have this chatter going on, when we're trying to hide that massive backpack behind us, and we're thinking, oh, there's no way I'm good enough for this. How can we get past that?
Well, speaking to someone like you, speaking to someone like me, having wise counsel, having someone who sees us for more than just our presenting selves, who understands us. I think, the core conditions of the therapist, and I believe of the coach, are, empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. That means being yourself, regarding people with honor, and putting a foot in their world and keeping one in your world, the empathic response. Because when you can do that, you can help someone to kind of question the negative stuff that comes in, to say, what is that about? Because a lot of people live like this. They have these negative thoughts and they're in front of their face, and it's only when you move it, you go, oh, but they're still here. So mindfulness is really key, isn't it? So you can look at this stuff here and here, but you don't want to be doing it all the time. You're going to look here as well. So it's about, us women often say we're good at multitasking. I actually think it's rubbish now. I think we're skilled at doing lots and lots of things is a better phrase, right? Because we can't think of two things at the same time. To work with you now, I've got to not be thinking about whether the washing's on, or whether I've got to do, all those sort of things, or whether I've got a plan for another webinar. I've got to be focused on this. And it's the same with the things that get in the way. Look at them briefly with someone you trust, and then move them and get on with things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess what I'm also wondering or holding is, and how does one even get to the place where you can notice that there is stuff in the way? Because sometimes, we've developed these habits for such a long time that it's just our default autopilot.
Yeah, I think time spent really unpacking stuff. We talk about the baggage and we talk about emotional clutter. When you notice there's noise and you can't think straight, spending time to look, because actually when I work with people, and like I say, senior people, and they're super anxious about something, they go into a place of burnout, or they're doubting they can do this role. When we start to look at that stuff, they start to recognize it comes from way back. And my therapeutic training is working with trauma and working with children and all sorts of those sort of issues. And when you, as an adult, discover something in the present day and you're going, why is that about? Why am I thinking that? And we track back and we go where it comes from. You can often find like the person goes, I think that's when I was like 7. And what we know is a 7-year-old cannot be CEO or a senior lawyer. And if that 7-year-old part of you is coming into that, then we need to understand and soothe it and find another way to be. So, but I suppose in answer to your question, truly, it's about spending time to look beneath the pretending issue. To the common parlance is, our assumptions, the imposter that comes in and invades us, and working out where that comes from and sometimes whose voice is it. I said at the beginning, didn't I? It's what's been said to us, not been said to us, done to us or not been done to us. So often parental injunctions come in and you hear stuff, and it might not be a parent, it could be a school teacher, or could be anything like that. And that comes in and gets in the way of how we view ourselves.
And I guess perhaps a way to notice that there might be something going on in the first place is when we have emotional responses that seem incongruent to perhaps the severity of the situation that we're faced right now.
Yeah, extreme, like over the top. Yeah. It's very interesting. I'm reading Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And in that, he was talking about logotherapy, and he's talking about how we almost bring into being our fears. So we literally bring them into effect. Whereas if we can believe something better for ourselves, we invite that. That sounds a bit woo-woo, but it's not at all. It literally is. If I was working, and coming to this interview with you, if I wound myself up like a top, what would happen is you get this frenetic interviewee. But because I'm not, I'm just being me. So it's interesting how we can almost trip ourselves into those ways of being. And I'm not sure if I answered your question properly then, did I?
No, that's fine, yes.
Okay.
tripping yourself into a way of being. Yeah, it's all us, isn't it? It's all our own doing. It's our own mind. It's
Yeah, clutter, like you say.
clutter.
I mean, clutter is an interesting word, actually, isn't it? I quite like it because it's things that get in the way. There's a desk there that's cluttered at the minute, although I can see the order myself. Anyone else that would think it's a pile of stuff, I can see what it is. But clutter is when you can't kind of think straight for the clutter, and that can be a desk. That can be clutter. You think I'm going to do this thing. Oh no, I've got to do that first, and it's all these things. So it's very professional. Clutter. The problem with the word clutter, I suppose, sounds a little bit of a house and clutter, but actually it's much more than that, isn't it? It's much more. It's about
It is.
mental clutter, things that prevent you from being all you can be. So it's a great word. Yeah, it's a great word.
Yeah, I like to say being all you can be and also being your best self.
Yes, yeah. Get out of the way of yourself, as I say.
Yeah, exactly. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Susie, for
My
talking to
pleasure.
me today. And if somebody wanted to find you to do some work with you, where might they find you? What's the best way of getting in touch with you?
Well, they can get on my website, which is
Yeah,
thebespokecoach.com, all one word,
yeah.
or they can Google Susie Flashman-Jarvis. They'll find out loads about me there.
Okay,
And yeah, thank
great.
you, Ingrid.
Well, thank you so
Thanks
much
very
for
much.
taking the time. It's
Yeah,
been a
thanks
very
for having
interesting
me.
conversation.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Gosh, what an interesting story Susie has. And there are lots of interesting thoughts also about emotions and how they can really get in our way. I love her representation of this big backpack that we're carrying and that we're trying to hide from others. And I'm sure all of us will have felt a little bit like an imposter or a bit like a fraud at some point in our lives. And perhaps we also still feel like that in certain situations. So, what's in your backpack? How big is your backpack? How heavy is it? And does it get in your way? Are you able to still even walk or run with it? Or is it really slowing you down and trying to keep you where you are? So, as we heard from Susie, the way to lighten that load a bit is to bring it all to the light and to look at it. And then it just becomes a little bit smaller and not quite as heavy anymore to carry. So I would love to hear your stories about your clutter and how it might get in your way. So feel free to get in touch. And in the meantime, look out for more conversations about creating space.